Norman Rockwell was born in New York City in 1894. Though urban dwellers, his family spent many summers in the country. Our heaven, he said, was the months on the farm. It had a lot to do with what I painted later on. His father often read Dickens in the evenings, and Rockwell would draw pictures of the different characters. He said, "After I got to know something about myself, I found that I didn't want to do anything else but draw." Rockwell quit high school to attend the Art Students League. There, his rigorous training as a fine artist included classes in anatomy and illustration technique. He employed models, costumes, and props. Success came early. At 17, Rockwell became art director for Boys Life, the Boy Scouts of America journal. Publishers hired him for books and magazines. For ambitious illustrators, the pinnacle of success was the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. Paintings of children caught in humorous situations earned Rockwell his first post cover on May 20th, 1916. He was 22 years old. That same year, he married Irene O'Connor, shown here as his model. Serving stateside in the Navy during World War I, he continued to paint, sharpening his depictions of heroes and the commonplace. In the 20s, Rockwell's career took off. For American magazines and advertisers, he had no equal. The four-color press breathed new life into his mass-produced illustrations, calendars, and advertisements. In 1926, the Post ran its first four-color cover, a Rockwell painting. Rockwell's work featured themes he would return to again and again, celebrating the commonplace, change and invention, honoring the American spirit, tradition, and the past. During the Depression, the Saturday Evening Post insisted on light-hearted covers. In 1929, Norman's marriage to Irene ended. The following year, he met and married Mary Barstow, a school teacher. They had 3 sons, Peter, Thomas, and Jarvis. Happy in his personal life, Rockwell endured a professional crisis. In 1932, he traveled to Europe and experimented with modernism. Commissions for 2 stories, Tom Sawyer and a biography of Louisa May Alcott, renewed his enthusiasm for illustration. In 1939, the Rockwells moved to Arlington, Vermont, where Rockwell began to paint small-town life more consistently. But the horizon was dark. When America went to war, so did Norman Rockwell, on canvas. He depicted the home front and the misadventures of a small-town recruit. In 1943, when President Roosevelt outlined the 4 freedoms that Americans were fighting for, Rockwell found a compelling way to help the war effort. He said, "I'll express the ideas in simple everyday scenes, take them out of the noble language of the proclamation, and put them in terms everybody can understand."
First is freedom of speech and expression. Second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way. Third is freedom from want. Fourth is freedom from fear.
The paintings ran in the Post and then toured the U.S. in the most successful war bond drive ever. When peace returned in 1945, Rockwell joined his countrymen in celebrating. America was on the move, and so was Norman Rockwell's world. A world of families and station wagons and suburban homes. In 1953, the Rockwells moved to Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Stockbridge, he said, is the best of America, the best of New England. I know everybody in Stockbridge. In 1959, Mary Rockwell died. 2 years later, at the age of 67, Rockwell married Molly Punderson, a retired teacher he'd met in a local poetry class. He was starting a new chapter in both his personal and professional life. Rockwell had begun to capture American leaders in portrait. Rockwell's 1960 portrait of John F. Kennedy was used again in the memorial issue after the president's assassination. It was Rockwell's final cover for the Post. During the 60s, Rockwell's primary focus was current events and social issues. His social commentary for Look magazine was fearless and unblinking. He embraced the idealism and courage of a nation charting its future. Norman Rockwell chronicled the American century as no one else did. His works number in the thousands, images of a nation's evolution, with extraordinary mass appeal. In a changing world, he was a reassuring guide. Technology fascinated Americans, and Rockwell shared that fascination. Henry Ford sold Model Ts by the millions, and Rockwell loved to show the automobile's impact, for better and for worse. Rockwell also came of age with manned flight, from the first person to fly the Atlantic, to the dawn of commercial air travel, to man's adventures in space. He captured it all. He celebrated our thirst for entertainment in all of its forms, from the national pastime to Hollywood to the debut of television. Rockwell captured our rites of passage with wit and wisdom. His subtlest observations addressed complex social issues. Rockwell looked back with pride at our rich national and literary heritage. In Family Tree, Rockwell imagines an American lineage unfettered by class or ethnicity, linking past and future. Rockwell said, "I was showing the America I knew and observed to others who might not have noticed." His eye for everyday drama and his devotion to detail guided his creative process. He strived for authenticity in his settings and props. He collected all manner of clothes and costumes. At first, he used professional models. Later, the camera allowed him to use anyone who could hold still for a picture. He recruited family and friends and scores of neighbors. He had a knack for finding just the right face and then seeing how high the eyebrows could go. Rockwell was both coach and model, using his own elastic face to demonstrate expressions. Rockwell said, "Meeting deadlines and thinking up ideas are the scourges of an illustrator's life." His subjects varied, but his process remained the same. He took photographs, sometimes by the hundred, tinkering with lighting, posing and reposing models, isolating elements of the scene. From these came charcoal sketches, usually the size of the final painting. At this point, he analyzed the composition and tones and solved technical problems. Color studies showed him how his choices would play on the newsstand. Finally, surrounded by all his references, he'd set to work on the final painting. Though Rockwell greatly admired the old masters as well as contemporary artists, he said, "The great band of illustrators have shown us to ourselves. I am proud to be of their company."
The kind of thing I like to do, I know it isn't the highest form of art. There's no doubt in the world about that, and I know it better than anybody else. I love to tell stories in pictures. The story is the first thing and the last thing. That isn't what a fine art man goes for. But I go for it, and I just love to do it that way, see.
Though he died in 1978, Rockwell's reputation has remained strong, continually growing. Today, the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, welcomes 200,000 visitors a year. Some come to remember, some to discover. His studio, where he created many of his most beloved works, now stands on the museum grounds. Norman Rockwell left us with images of and for the American people, reminding us to believe in ourselves, honor the past, embrace the future, and see ourselves as he did, with warmth and compassion.